Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, wherever you might be. I'd like to get us started for our webinar today on retirement planning. My name is Peter Mullen, and I'm one of the counselors, presenters from American Consumer Credit Counseling. We are an organization, a nonprofit. We provide counseling, presentations such as this, education in the community. We've been doing this for coming up to 30 years now. So I know some of you have joined us regularly. I thank you for coming back. And for others, if you're new, I'll tell you what we're going to do today. But briefly, again, my background is that I've been in financial services now for myself for about 3 decades. We do hold these sessions, just so you know, twice a month now on all different topics. And it's our goal here to give you an opportunity to ask some questions, which I'll tell you how we do that. You're on mute right now, or you're basically you've been placed in a listen-only mode. But there will be times where I will certainly ask to get your questions. I want them as part of our interaction today. There's not a lot of people on today, so we will be able to, I'm sure, answer whatever questions you might have. It all depends on the time we have up until basically 12 o'clock. So we have a little less than an hour to go. The way it will work is I will either ask a question or simply open it up for your questions. And then on your end, you'll be able to present your questions in the chat. My colleague, Maddie, will help me in organizing those and just send some to me. So please don't be shy. I would love to hear what you're thinking, or if I've not clarified something, please let me know. So let's get started with our presentation today and make sure that you're clear on what we're doing. All right, so for today's goals and what we're trying to do is we want to explore today the many decisions that one can make and one needs to make to prepare for retirement. The fact is, I think the key word for today, it's all about getting information and making decisions. There's a lot out there. So part of the challenge, I think, for you and for everyone is to learn. You have to learn what is out there, what's the pros and cons, which I'll share a lot with you, and then begin to understand the fact that, you know, what you pick and what you select, first off, can be changed for the most part, but there's choices that will help you have either a, you know, good size, good strength, good reliability, hopefully good durability of your accounts. Those are all the kinds of things you want to be thinking of. So today's agenda is really all about the decisions that you make. And we're going to use an analogy I think that works quite well for us today, which is I used to be in the banking industry, and you always talk about investment vehicles. So today we're going to talk about where you park your investment vehicles for retirement, deciding what you're going to park in your retirement garage, deciding when you're going to start, use, and run out of retirement funds or fuels. You need to be thinking of all these things. And I guess, again, a lot of decisions, but hopefully this will give you some ideas and some things you know you need to pull together. Final facts and factors for managing your retirement. Before I actually go into this, what I wanted to do, I thought a little different than I've done in the past. I wanted to answer some of the questions you guys provided us in the registration. So let me just answer some of them now, and they'll prime the pump. So for some of you, for questions later on. Let me just ask some of them and tell you. What should I do if I haven't started savings for retirement in my 40s? A couple people asked that. I would just say, number one, start now. Start now, and I will give you some advice on how to do that. There's things you can do, and there's things you need to do, but there's no time like the present. Is early retirement possible? By all means. It all depends on lots of things, though. What you want, how old you are, what kind of monies you have coming in, and what monies do you want when you retire, right? How can I save for retirement when I'm struggling with my bills? Well, that's a very good question for everybody. And that's something, again, I will try to address as best I can. It is a matter of prioritization. It is a matter of beginning to recognize, again, where you are in your age relative to when you retire. There's ways to help make that work better for you. I will try to cover some of those. And if I don't, please ask the question. Let me see, I would say another one here is, should we count on Social Security being there in 20 years? Great question. I really can't answer that. Even our government can't answer that. So I would assume for most people, you need to act and pretend as if you're not getting Social Security. I think that's the safe way to plan that. Okay, so let's get into some of the questions and some of the ways to deal with this today. All right, so I think that one of the things that starts coming up, I told this is going to have lots of questions, and I give my credit to Buzz Lightyear here for going from here to retirement and beyond, and that's really what we're trying to cover today. It brings us to a lot of questions, of which I've summoned down to kind of three major sections: where and how we park our vehicles, what vehicles do we park, and when. So let's cover some of these as a starter, and then we'll go through some of it and then begin to ask some questions that you might have, or open it up to questions. So where and how? So if we're going to go with this example that in the end, it's all about you having some money when you retire. The first question is where you're going to park it, where you're going to put it, how you're going to get it. Well, there's a number of ways. We'll go into a little detail, but just the highlight is you can get it through your job, you can get it through a bank, investment companies, insurance companies, the government, yourself. There's lots of sources and places of how you get the money, and then where you place it. It could be in your own accounts or with an investment advisor, as an example. And with every one of these, as some of your questions indicated, there's pros and cons. There's things that are positive and things that are negative. That's your job to kind of think it through, right? Always ask questions. That's the power that you got. I'm asking questions for you, but your power as a customer is to ask questions of everybody and everyone, right? And you have to decide in the end about what works for you. The what part of this is the fact that what you park in your garage is an investment vehicle or more. There's many, one or many, and they take all types of shapes and forms, just like a car. Just think about cars for a second. You can buy small cars, large cars, cars with certain colors and attributes, and they all are to meet your needs. Some people need an SUV, and some people need just a small Kia. There's no right or wrong. It depends on what their needs are. But what you have to do in this process is start to learn to ask about fees or returns or yields on the investments. You need to find out about taxes. So if nothing else, this should be an awareness for you on what to ask. And then for you, you need to do homework. There's no two ways about it. Even if you hired somebody, as an example, one of the questions did come to us, should you hire an investment advisor or a financial advisor? And I would say, again, it depends, because you have to pay for them. So if you feel they will add a lot of value to you and they will make up for more than the amount that they charge, by all means, look into it. But you have to then think it through. If their fees are on the high side, are they going to make you investment money income that exceeds their fees? If not, I don't see why that's a reasonable thing to do. Another word I'll introduce here is active versus passive, just to say that when you are thinking of investments, whether they are active or passive, we will cover what that means, but that makes a difference in terms of how you deal with things. The last section here I have is the when. And this is one of the big, as they say, $64,000 questions. The first two you can get kind of rolling. But the harder one here is this whole idea of, when do you need all this? Now, the reality is a lot of this is math. We can do the math, and you can project out and say, how much do I need 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 60 years from now? That's all mathematics and assumptions. The harder part is the presumptions and predictions about the future. So let me just give you a quick example in my own family, as one of these is a tough question, but you got to ask it. When do you expect to die? It's not a fun question, but I can just say in my own family, I have a great grandmother who was 101, 4 aunts and uncles who were 99, 98, and then one uncle still who's with us who's 98. So that's one piece of my life, but my father died at 64, which is the age I am right now. So, who knows what the future is? And then you see the bottom question under here is, what do you want to leave? To complicate the whole question for you as you start this journey is even thinking not just about yourself and your family today, but, even a legacy begins to make it more complex. So just as an example, I read in the news yesterday, Warren Buffett is 90, and he has this dilemma. He has $500 billion to get rid of, and he doesn't want to leave it to his children. So he does have lots of choices in his future. I would say if you know him, certainly get to be friendly with him. Okay, so let's move on into some of the questions and some of the thinking you might want to have, and then I'll open it up to questions for people before we get into some of the detail. Okay, so again, questions you might be thinking of, very rational. Some of the ones that came in the registration. How much will I need? Well, that's a tough thing to judge. Basically, what you typically will do is look at what you make today, and then usually some smaller amount is what you need as you get to be 65 or 70. You usually use a certain amount less than that, but then you have to factor in other things, like for instance, inflation. Somebody asked about, how do you know what the future is again? Nobody knows, but we do know that inflation will probably eat some of it. What should I start about? When should I start taking Social Security? Again, there are decisions you'll have to make. You can't start later. You can start at 62, but you can't start later than 70 and a half. So there are parameters as to when you can start and stop. There's pros and cons of each. How much will I lose in taxes and fees? That's a big question. You should be asking that. You should find that out. This fourth question, where can I maximize yield and lower risks? Maybe that sounds technical to you, but that is the biggest question every investor asks. People would love to have a great return of money back to them with little or no risk. There's almost nothing out there in which you can describe as that. So you do the best you can. And then how long will I live after retiring? Who knows? But what you can do for all of these is make assumptions, do the best you can, talk to relatives, find out what worked for them, what didn't work. Talk to financial counselors. They don't all cost money. I, in fact, am a financial counselor at a nonprofit. If you were to engage with me, it would all be free. I can help you with ideas and suggestions. Talk to your CPA if you're having tax questions or whatever. Investment advisors, again, one of the big questions is, are the securities I'm buying or getting, is it a passive investment, meaning that they've set up a computer program to run it all, it's not really human touch, or am I having an actual person who advises me day to day, week to week, month to month? You will pay a lot more for them. That's called an active manager. So according to what your needs are, you might go with a passive investment strategy, it's usually cheaper, or go with an active investment strategy, a person heavily involved in your life. So with that, what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to pause for some questions and see what people have. Are there any questions? I'm putting out to the whole group. I'm sending it out to you. And I'm hoping that will make you basically send some questions in so far. Some of you, it may be from your original question I answered. Maddie will send some over to me, and we will go from there. So we'll open it up for a little bit for some of your chat to come through. As that's coming in, as a few of them come in, you can see that these questions are not easy. They are ones that really involve, in some cases, you can do the math, like I said. You can certainly do some math and figure things out, but in other cases, they just are speculation. We do the best we to speculate. Okay, no questions coming in yet, then let's move on. Okay, let's start getting into some of the details. So this is what I said again as the kind of the way I wanted to present all this, a little bit of a, hopefully a creative way, an understandable way, is to think first of where do we park our investments, our investment vehicles. Well, you've got to decide. And the good news is there's many ways, right? So let's talk about the four that I know of that cover most of everything that I'm aware of. Through your job is one. So in other words, through most jobs, again, you may or may not have this, but most corporate jobs, most jobs out there allow you some form with through HR, to be able to get into some investments in retirement. As a matter of fact, they are more and more taking the default, they'll sign you up unless you say no. So because of the fact that the savings rates have been so low. But let me just highlight a few things here. Number one, it's extremely easy to do. And if this whole thing today confuses you or depresses you, one great thing to think about is looking at target funds. They're very simple. They are relatively inexpensive, and all it's done is basically you put in the date you think you'll retire, and it does the rest. It's so simple. So if you figure you're going to retire, I'm making this up, 25 years from now, you put in the date of whatever that is, 2046, and it will do all the expectations and management from there. A big question for anyone who's in a company that has 401k, and that simply is a type of retirement, is definitely find out if they match, which simply means, will they give you some money if you put in money? If that's the case, if you don't know what I'm talking about, please ask. But if matching is available, you absolutely are advised to take advantage of that. It's free money, and it's one of the best. There's no investments I know of that make more money than the matching you get from your own employer. 403B is not matched, but it is another type of plan from schools and government. There's also company stock plan where you buy the stock of the company. As a rule, this is not advised because you have too many eggs in one basket. If you are both getting your company stock plan and you're working at that same company, if your company goes down, you're losing not only your job, but potentially the value of your stock. And the good news is there's usually a whole menu of choices for you to pick from. Through a financial institution. Now, again, there's many out there for you to choose from. That's good. But on the other hand, sometimes that gets confusing. But let me highlight some of the key items on the menu here today. Your local bank or credit union has often investments you can buy locally. CDs or certificates of deposit, money market funds, or other types of funds. They will always post them in the lobby somewhere typically, and you can buy them directly. When you get a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more out there, there's things like investment companies and insurance companies that sell a different brand of products, right? And as with anything else, they have different costs and different interest rates. Some of them are related to the stock market. I could make one comment right here for some folks. It's one of the few pieces of good news in terms of investing is this. If you do work through a broker or your own app, which there are apps now, to get to the stock market has the longest record, and it's long term, I'm talking 20, 30, 40 years of if you put your money in it, yes, it goes up and down like a roller coaster, but overall it returns about 8% of a return. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with returns on investments, but that's extremely high. There's very few other things in life that you can get that kind of a return. Insurance companies have things called annuities or GICs, which is guaranteed investment contracts, just other brands of products they want to sell you. If you buy a stock, you're buying ownership and you're getting dividends back as a result. Bonds are not ownership. You're lending money to a corporation, and for that value of you lending to them, they give you back at maturity, the money you lent them, plus interest on a regular semi-annual basis. So these are all different products. They work different ways. And of course, the tax treatment is different for them as well. So those are the things that, as an intro that you'd want to ask and know about. Through the government, you've probably heard a lot of these, you know about them, but recognize that the main highlight of the government offerings in retirement for your retirement is very safe, but very low returns. That means they pay you very little interest. In some cases, almost zero interest. But you can get Series EE bonds, which you often I used to have as a kid. People would buy them for me, or we bought them for other people's kids. It takes a long while for you to gain interest on these things. T-bills, T-notes, and T-bonds, treasuries. These are treasuries. All they have is different lifespans. That's the only difference between them. But overall, they are safe. Our government will never not be able to print money as far as we know, but the amount of money you get back is very, very limited. Tax-free municipal bonds, as a rule, again, this is what I've read in all my stuff in prep for today, that treasuries and munis or municipal bonds really have no place inside a retirement portfolio because you have safety through other features. Those are so low in their returns, it's generally not considered a good part of your portfolio. But it's up to you. and what your risk tolerance is. Social Security basically is another thing. And when I say when full, that simply means is everybody's Social Security, which I do expect us to get, but I don't know, becomes full at a certain age. For me, it's 67, I think 67 and a half. For you, depending on your age, it depends on when you started, but at some point it will become fully funded for you. It's advised generally not to start taking it at age 62 unless you need to, but once you start to take it, it gets locked in at that lower amount. By yourself, the good news here again is there's lots of things you can do on your own. And by the way, you can do a combination of these things. You don't have to just do one. But I'm telling you what the basic garages are where you can park your vehicles or get your vehicles from. By yourself, by all means, keep this one going. Aggressive savings. You'll never be, that will never hurt you, except the fact you may not have as much money in your pocket today, but it certainly is money that you're not throwing away. It's money for you. Real estate is another thing. It's a little bit more risky though, and as we'll see in a minute, risk and return are related, but it's another way to potentially make money. Again, we don't know what the housing prices will be a year or 5 years from now or 10 years from now. Starting a business or investing in a business, again, a little bit more risky, but potentially a great money maker. You have to look at it and you have to do the research. IRAs, there's all kinds of forms of IRAs, which are individual retirement accounts. They are different ways for you to store money. Again, they can be done in addition to what you're getting in your job, let's say your 401k, but even that has limits, as I'll show you later on. So overall, these are different ways for you to get into the whole system where you have brokerage and trading accounts. I would mention to you the good news again with everything, as they always say, there's an app for that. Well, there are apps out there. Again, I'm not promoting them. I'm just telling you some of them. There's things like LearnVest, Robinhood, Webull, Fidelity. There's other kinds of apps you can get into in which you can trade on your own. So yes, you can do it yourself if you've got if you believe in what you're doing. I would say by all means give it a shot. Let me talk about the next thing then. You've parked your vehicle in a garage. Well, you have to have the vehicle, right, to park it. So here's what we consider in the next wave here is all about what do we park? What do we buy? And in the end, by the way, it's interesting. I never really thought of it this way, but I kind of, again, like this nice way of thinking about it. In the end, every single one of your investments come down to one of two things. You either own the vehicle or you lend. So think of the money that you have. You are either buying an investment which you own, like stock or real estate, and it gains in value, or you're lending money. That's what essentially an IRA is. That's what essentially a bond is. It's you lending money. So those are the two basic ways, but overall, this is what you've got to think about. When you put in your garage, are you putting in a Mazda or a Mercedes? Are you putting in a Kia or a Cadillac? Well, there's high costs, low returns. This is what you've got to think about. It's all about risk versus return. And as a general thing for folks, this isn't an investment class, but I'll just tell you the generals, which is, as a general rule, if you have low risk on an asset, you get low return. CDs, money market funds, government bonds, as I already mentioned, they tend to give you little interest over time. But on the bright news, they are safe. So you have to think of your appetite for risk. As you go into the middle, there's some guys in the middle here. Equity mutual funds, residential real estate, utility stocks are examples of things that are in the middle, a little bit more risky, but generally you get a higher return from it, which means, instead of getting 1%, maybe you'll get 4% or 6% return. Depends on the stock market, depends on the situation. By the way, mutual funds, just as a note, can be anything. Mutual funds are a fund of items, a collection, a basket of items, of which the items in it can be anything. So mutual funds can be very low, medium, or high, depending on what's in it. The last one I'm mentioning here is this is the higher risk, but generally higher returns if they return money. Small capital stocks, limited partnerships, penny stocks. Okay, if you buy a lot of these, it's again, You may or may not get any money back, or you may make a bundle. If you buy penny stocks that are very, very small cost per stock, and you happen to hit the jackpot of something that takes off, hey, that could be great for you. Or 6 months from now, the thing goes under. A lot of small capital stocks, they don't make it. A huge amount of them don't. So you would be advised to know these things before you go into any of them. I have over here down the bottom about returns again. So think about the returns, which is basically what money do I make? What interest do I make? What income do I make? Well, there are some drags on that. And some of the drags that you might be familiar with are things like fees again. Fees, also known as basis points, by the way, and I'll explain that in a moment. But in the industry, they're called basis points. For every 100 basis points of cost, that means 1% of cost. So if I had a $1,000 investment and my investment advisor charged me 100 basis points to manage my $1,000, they would take 1% away. 100 basis points would be $10. But increase that out. Let's say you had $1 million in your portfolio, then they're going to be taking out a much higher amount, $10,000. The last thing I'll point out over here on the left is this, and I mentioned this earlier, but just to say it again, is that part of your decision making in here is thinking about active versus passive. And what that means is, again, you thinking of, do I want a person, a male, female, somebody who's a knowledgeable investment advisor managing all my assets? And if you do, that's what's called active. But you pay a price for that. You have to figure out the details. Is what they're managing helping me so much that it's worth it? Or do you trust yourself? Do you trust certain index funds, which are basically computer-driven models? You can have a fund that mirrors the Dow Jones. They've just created an algorithm, a computer file that does that. There's no human involved anymore. So you pay far less. Your basis points are far less. Maybe, let's just say 50 basis points or 40 basis points. Okay, so that's that whole thing. People say, oh, this is like gambling. Well, I would differ on that one. This isn't gambling. It's well thought out, hopefully well thought out, informed decisions on your part and on the part of the people you work with. So, you know, we all do the best we can, but I had to say some examples. Who knew on 9/10/01 that the trade, what would happen with the trade towers? Who knew in February of last year what would happen with a pandemic? Nobody. Nobody really knows exactly what the future is. So, but what do we know will be there? We do know fees, taxes, inflation. They're not going anywhere, unfortunately. So you got to do the best you can to pick the ones that work for you. All right. Let me do another couple slides, and then again, I'd like to open it up to Maddie and see if anybody has any further questions, okay? So, the next one, let's think about the when. We've thought about where you park it, we've thought about what you park. Okay, so now, you know, the when part drives a lot of decision making. So I'm gonna show you two ways to think about this for those who are here and some of your questions. You can think about investing and getting money from back to front. And let me explain what that means. It means you simply say, today, what do I need when I retire 40 years from now, 30 years from now, 50 years from now, whatever your age is, you calculate what you need then, and you do the work now to get to that number. That's back to front. The other way is front to back, and I'll show you that in the second example, which is here you are today, at whatever age you are and whatever income. What can I do if I start putting this money away? What will I get in some future time? And that may or may not be enough for you. It may change your behaviors and your decisions. So let's go with an example here, and I hope this spurs some more questions for you and some thinking. And I'll go over this, and then I'll open it up for questions again. So let's think about these factors. And again, I had to make some assumptions here, and you know, just something to hang our hat on. So let's tell you how this works. I'm pretending now that you make or I make $50,000 a year, and you have an expected annual increase from your job of 1%. You have put no money in as your initial investment. So you're starting out and you're beginning to expect this. You're saying to yourself, well, I don't need 50,000 per year when I live in the future. I'm only going to look to spend 45,000 or something less. But I do know I want to retire at age 70. So here's the rule of thumb to help you figure out what you need in the future. So you'll notice that what you do is you take, and this is just a typical plan people do. You can make it higher or lower. Some people say 3%, some say 4%, some say 5%. But take the amount of money you think you're going to need per month, 45,000, and divide it by 3.5% or 0.035. Basically, what you're saying is I will spend at that rate of 3.5% of my overall portfolio. So what do I need at age 70? Well, I need 1.29 million. To make that happen, I need that amount. And so then again, now we have to jump to the next part about assumptions. If you're making this jump today and you on the line, I have no idea how old you are. You know how old you are. You are 20 years old. Well, you have 50 years between now and age 70. You need to start saving a little more than 2,000 per year. Hopefully you'll see how this all works very quickly, right? If you're age 30, you got 40 years to go. You need 6,800 per year to get to that 1.29 million. 40 with 30 years to go, you need 10,000 per year, and age 50 with 20 years to go, even if you spent your whole paycheck, 50,000, you would not reach the amount. So what you would reach is just a little less than $1 million. So this says a lot of things about the timing, your assumptions, what you decide to do. But again, the good thing to think about is this is math, right? These are numbers. You can play with the numbers, you can change assumptions, you can find better things and work it until it works, right? So that's what I would suggest for people. So the front to back, again, is us beginning to say, to get a certain amount that I've determined, maybe you change your assumption. Maybe I don't need $45,000 a year. I know my wife and I, as we are getting close to retirement, we now know because we've paid our house off, we don't need as much money. So our needs for when we retire will be smaller than that. And you have to determine what it is for you and your family and so many other things, okay? And there's so many factors. You can do this with an advisor, do it with a counselor like myself. Generally, the nonprofits like mine are free, so they can help you do some of the thinking through. But in the end, you need to answer a lot of questions. It's all about you and your questions and your situation, okay? Let's go over example 2, and then I will again open it up to questions that you might have. Example 2 is going from the other way, from front to back. So what would I have if I started today? What will I get? That's kind of the way this thinks. You haven't set a number yet. The number we don't know. We're trying to find what that number is. So let's go with this one. Example 2 says, let's just pretend today I'm making 40,000 this time. And today you're age 30. So I know how old I am. I want to retire at age 67. So I know that I have 37 years in which to build up something. If I put an initial investment in of 10,000, I'll just make a note here, by the way. If you add an initial starting point and you have a good period of time, that only helps to increase because that 10,000 plus all your other contributions and savings will then hopefully build up to a greater number. But in this case here, the question is, how much will I have? So if you do the math, and by the way, I'm using a bank rate retirement calculator, I would suggest you do the same thing of put in the numbers and asking the what if questions. At age 67, after 37 years, you would have a little less than $800,000. And if I spend at that continued rate of $32,000 a year, that money's left over would be eaten up by the time I'm 84. So you can begin to see the complexity of all this and the assumption you need to make. Will you live? Will I live to age 84? I don't know. I don't know if I'll be here tomorrow. On the other hand, I have a great-grandmother who lived to 101. She was born in 1852, and she lived to 1953. I thought that was pretty good. So the what if question comes here. you can change this. This is where you could begin to play with this. Okay, let's do two what ifs. One what if is this. Well, instead of retiring at age 67, what if I delay my retirement to age 71? It's only 4 years, right? But look, because you've delayed it, you gain so much more in your last few years of working and gaining money that you would actually have over $1 million if you delayed it and don't start eating it, to not taking it away. And your funds of the 32,000 would then run out at age 93. What another what if? What if I don't put 10% in, but what if I save at 15%? Well, and then I still retire at age 67. Well, that says that I will have 1.1 million there, and my savings will run out at age 92. So you need to do the math. You need to make your assumptions. You need to make decisions with an investment advisor or somebody who can help you about what to put in the garage, how long you think that vehicle has to work for you, what kind of choices you're going to make for buying that, like I said, buying that Kia or that Cadillac, or buying that Mazda or that Mercedes. It's cost in, but then it's savings or gains on the other side. Okay, so I'm going to ask again if there's any questions. Are there any questions? And throw that back to everybody. Maddie will hopefully get some coming in. In the meantime, I'm going to shift the slide and start to think about sources and types of income. Okay, so we're going to a little bit of investment 101, but not too much. I'm not here to go into all the investment stuff because it's just too much. All right, so in sources, you have choices again. This is just showing you a little graph right now of where a lot of people have put their money. Again, you don't have to follow it, but it shows you where a lot of people source their money from. Social Security, about a third. Earnings, 27%. And by the way, the things I just showed you previously were based largely on earnings and investment on that. If you did other types of things where you were also gaining, depending on the vehicles, certain types of interest and other types of things, that those earnings could be higher. I was basing this strictly on the taking money out of your salary. But the sources there are varied. So here's what you need to think. You have to think about your investment vehicles, all right? And here it is loaded with gold. That's you, whatever your investments are. And here's the way to think about it. And I give a lot of credit, by the way, and I say this a lot because he's a great source. And I have this in the references at the back. Trent Ham writes a blog called The Simple Dollar. So much of this is great stuff from him and from him and all that he does. And so here's his thoughts on just how you might approach this. In addition to what you get, here's some logical steps for you to do as you go ahead. Some you know, some you don't. Number one, get rid of all your high interest debt first. If you have credit cards on the one hand that are charging you 20%, 25% on the one hand, and you have some investment on the other side, on your asset side, that's gaining you 2%, it makes no sense to keep this investment on the one income side of making you 2% while you're spending 25% out the other side of the door. 2% coming in the front door, 25% going out the back door. So you need to get rid of high interest debt first before you start doing some things. Get to know the fees. Again, they're also known as basis points in the industry. 100 basis points equals 1%. Aim for diversification. As they say, don't put all your eggs in one basket. All the investments I showed you a little bit earlier, it's always best and always advised, and you can do this yourself. You don't need an investment advisor to tell you this. Have a good, healthy mix of bonds, safe items, risky items, items that grow. Have a whole mix. And then if any one sector goes down, you don't simply suffer overall. Obviously, this one for buy low, sell high. That's again, you do the best you can. You have to know the history, and you have to look and think as to where it's been. And again, it's anyone's guess. No one really knows if what you're buying today or selling today is at its low point or high point. Don't ignore taxes because they are a big bite out of what you do. So they do make a big difference, especially in a world in which we gain so little on the interest side. Taxes take a huge proportional bite out of your savings. And then finally, factor in time to start, time to spend, time to last, meaning the funds themselves. You got to think about all these in terms of the timing. The types, as I said before, it's kind of interesting. All the types that are out there can be boiled down to two things. You're either an owner of the asset, that would be like in the example of stock or a real estate, you're the owner, or the company, you're the owner. Or you're lending. You're lending out monies so somebody else can do their thing and they pay you interest for that. So here's what they come down to in terms of really when you want to summarize them. In terms of how you make money, it largely comes out to these three forms, and they're taxed differently. So that's when an investment advisor might come into play, or a tax accountant comes into play. But when you sell an investment, it's known as capital gains. Real estate, stock, other things. Dividends come from stocks. The quarterly dividends, they come from stocks that you buy. Not every stock has a dividend, by the way. And some stocks will stop their dividend if they're not doing that well. So dividends are not guaranteed, by the way. So you'd have to check the history. A lot of things in the future are not guaranteed. Income from bonds. What you are guaranteed is if you lend a company $10,000 to buy their bond, you will get your bond money back, with few exceptions unless they go bankrupt. You'll get what's called your principal back at maturity. And they should be paying you, operative word, semi-annual interest. And that's usually the benefit people get from it. So you're thinking of these things typically of, what do I think is going to give me money? What do I think is a great thing to go for? I can tell you another quick fact, which is this. What you don't want to do, this is everything I've read, is as a general rule, the type you pick, you don't want to have the super huge piece of your investment to be the really safe, tax-free municipal bonds, treasuries. The yield, the yield is the money they give back to you. For the safety that you have, they will take away a lot of your yield. So if you're looking to grow your money and add to it, it's generally thought that, unless you're like a year away from retirement, those are things not to simply think about. I wanted to provide some other facts here we've talked about, and I'm not going to go over them all, just other than to say, here are some other facts and factors for you to think about. And they are, again, you'll have this when we're done, so you can look at it yourself. The main thing I want you to think about is, I like this idea, something I learned from Trent Hannigan. Up in the upper left corner is Social Security. People ask about that. This is what I like to think about, if you can. Another thing we haven't talked about is healthcare costs. That's just another whole thing. All I do know and expect is my healthcare costs will probably go up as I get older. So this is the way I look at it. I don't even count my Social Security as income, and I don't count my healthcare as costs. I think the two of them will pretty much wipe each other out. So if you think that way, try to do all your savings and investing apart from those two, unless you have solid facts on them. And again, that's one of the big questions. So I want to focus on the lower right corner for a moment and just tell you some facts you should know. Hopefully you know these, but I want to make sure you do. Overall, nobody can take their money out before they're 59 and a half. If you do, you're going to get a penalty, both a federal tax, state tax, and a penalty. But you also can't wait until after you're 70 and a half. They'll penalize you. If I wait until I'm 72 to start taking my money, I'll get whacked. Okay? How to avoid taxes? Use rollovers. What does that mean? People have asked me this. Do I lose my fund from another company if I move? No. You do a rollover to move it from company A to company B. Rollovers have no tax implications. You're not taking it out. Don't make the mistake of leaving a company and saying, oh, I got $10,000 sitting in this account. I think I'll use it. Well, if you do, you'll be taxed and penalized for that. You'll probably lose 3,000 or 4,000 of that 10,000. You'll probably only walk away with around 6. So it's a hefty thing to pay for to get 6,000. There are exceptions out there based on, certain other things. So again, death, disability, medical, military. Military has lots of advantages again. So if you're in the military, These are great things to think about. They can certainly help you in a lot of ways. And I've already mentioned the basis points, which is also known as the percent of what they take. But also another one to highlight here is commissions. So again, your antennas should go up. And let me give you a good case in point. When your advisor or anyone says to you, here, buy all these annuities, those are insurance contracts that pay you money back per year. Well, you need to ask more about them because those are typically high on commission. And that's a conflict of interest. If your advisor is selling you things of which they personally make a lot of money, that to me is a good case of conflict of interest and something to be aware of. You need to ask, how much do you make on this? How much is your company making on selling this to me? And you need to be advised. If you found that that was 200 basis points, 500 basis points, meaning 5%, then they're really sucking money off of you and that you may not want to do. I'm going to go to a summary and ask for any final questions people might have. My summary for everyone on the line is certainly saving for retirement is not an easy thing. It's a work that you have to do, but I'd say be involved, do it. So number one, you need to be saving something. No matter what your age or situation, you need to be saving something. There's a lot of Americans out there who have nothing. So be part of the group that has something. Time is your greatest ally, meaning that in addition to all the work you do, let time, so I don't know your age, but the earlier you start, the greater that this other feature of compounding comes in to get interest on interest. So everyone gets interest, let's just say, on their investment, on the principal. But if you let it ride, meaning let it sit there for 10, 20, 30 years, you get interest on the interest that's compounded. Number three, there's many options out there. That's great. You've got a lot of things to choose from, but it also puts the responsibility of decisions onto you. You've got to look at them, research them, do your homework. Don't feel bad if whatever you've done, you can always change it. I think for the most part, unless you've locked yourself into a bond or a contract, and those are things that you might lock in for, like a CD. You lock in for 10 years. Yes, you could get penalized if you change your mind. So for the most part, you can change your mind. You can sell an investment. There's always ways to get out of most of your things. Number four, I leave this as hopefully a happy thing for everybody. If you're overwhelmed with all the things I've discussed today, there are things called target index funds, which again is a passive investment. It means it has less of a cost. And it usually is low stress for you because I plug in my retirement. I want to retire 20 years from now. That's, let's say, what's that, 20 years from now? That'd be 41. In 2041, they rebalance all your monies to help you make money by the time by the time 2041 comes along. And it gets more and more safe as you get closer to the date. And then 5, I just wrote, to dump your expensive clunkers, your high credit card debt before getting newer vehicles. Before you put a shiny new vehicle in your garage, in your retirement garage, make sure the clunky one that's sucking away your gas and your costs and you're paying all kinds of costs to keep, get rid of that and move on. I leave you with references. I've mentioned today. I already mentioned the bank rate calculator. Trent Ham writes The Silver Dollar. I like this book in this particular case, Personal Finance for Dummies. I look at a whole array of things before I do a seminar. And then I noted a bunch of IRAs that again, the Simple Dollar suggested. I'm not here to tell you to do them. I'm trying to give them as options for you to consider. But the good thing is, again, if one of the earlier pages said that if your investments, like from your company, aren't making it, there is the ability, for instance, I'll just point out some of them on the prior pages. You have the ability to do catch up. If you have monies from some other source, you can add an additional $19,000 of your own. You can get IRAs, for instance, of up to $6,000 in addition to anything else. So there's ways to do catch up and to make your portfolio get bigger. I think that brings us to the end. I'm going to ask my last time if there's any questions, and then we'll go from there. So Maddie, is there anything else from anybody coming in? Or maybe I can go to the last, maybe return back to the first questions I heard at the very beginning when people are registered. I will look for that for a second while you're telling me if anything else is coming in. All right, where did that sheet go? All right. So, okay, I'm going to return to that sheet, see if there's anything else left on there that wasn't covered. I already said the one, should we count on Social Security? Nobody really knows. If you haven't started, the best thing is to start now. Take one of these choices, try to go with it. How can you save for the cost of living increasing in retirement? That's a good one. And I would say that's also known as inflation. And most of the time, investment advisors will certainly keep that in consideration. And they will factor that in terms of the investments they buy for you or the ones you borrow, that kind of thing. And again, another thing you always have choices are, don't forget your choices. You can delay your retirement. You can have things come out at a later time. Okay. Yes, what are some recommendations as I'm trying to replace retirement and prepare for my daughter for the future, age 52, daughter 2? What are some of the recommendations? Hopefully I've covered all of them. I would say if she has no retirement, she's age 52, then she does definitely have some catching up to do. It's a matter of, hopefully there's a combination of things is really how I would attack it for her or anybody. You're trying to pull every lever you can. So between her workplace, she's seeing what they may give her or help her with or help her to get into. There's things on her own. I mentioned how she herself can use monies in certain ways. Again, it all goes back to her risk tolerance, but she needs to be thinking of the variety of ways and what she's willing to do. She also needs to, I don't know what her health is like, but that makes a difference. The health of somebody, they can always extend their working time. So if she's 52, she could still work for the next 20 years, right? 20, maybe 25 years, depending on her situation and what she does. So that trade-off will mean that she's not dipping into the account sooner. She's trying to delay it. And that's like, those are things that are options for you. The whole bit about Social Security, we'll go back to that for a second. I didn't talk about the other date. You can start it at age 62, but you can't not start it at age 70 and a half. You have to start it. But once you find that middle age, and I think I did mention it briefly, once I know my maximum age to gain Social Security is like 67 and a half. So it's best for her to wait, to not draw upon that until needed. If you have a husband, partner, whoever had the longer and higher income over time will draw the greatest Social Security amount per month. Always try to grab it at its maximum and grab it when you can, when it makes sense. Good. Any other questions? And thank you for your question, by the way. Anyone else? You're welcome, Nicole. I thank you very much for your attendance. I'm going to sign off for now. I thank you for your attention, for your questions. I look forward to seeing you all again and hearing from you at our next webinars in July. So thank you all. This is Peter Mullen signing off right now.